Okay, confession. This was originally going to be another bolster basket, but then they kept revealing Red Dragon Archfiend supports, so I kept putting it off. When was someone going to tell me they were releasing a whole ass Red Dragon Archfiend structure deck? Anyway, I found one the other day and bought it, and just in terms of cards that specifically support Red Dragon Archfiend, this deck has 7 cards, but there are also 3 more cards here that are adjacent to the archetype, 2 of which have been out for a while and I neglected to cover, so let's get this over with. Also, can we just take a moment to ask why they did Jack dirty like this? Why is the box so much smaller than this Obelisk deck I also found at Walmart? Yes, I know it's to cut down on plastic, shut up. We'll start with the 2 new tuners, the first of which is Vision Resonator. It's a fiend like all the rest, this one being a dark level 2 with 400 attack and defense. If a level 5 or higher dark monster is on the field, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Vision Resonator once per turn this way. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 spell or trap that mentions Red Dragon Archfiend from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effective Vision Resonator once per turn. This may seem quite lackluster at first, given a lot of the original Red Dragon Archfiend support was kinda garbage, but there are some new cards here that definitely make the search worth it, and it helps that the search is pulled off just by going to the graveyard, meaning it also goes off when used as synchro material. Given Red Rising Dragon is a level 6 and also included in this deck, this can also make for a decent Red Dragon Archfiend play very quickly. The next tuner is the level 3 Soul Resonator, a fire monster with 500 attack and 300 defense. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add 1 level 4 or lower fiend from your deck to your hand, except Soul Resonator. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from your extra deck for the rest of this turn, except Dark Synchro monsters. If a card you control will be destroyed by card effect while you control Red Dragon Archfiend or a monster that mentions it, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. You can only use each effective Soul Resonator once per turn. Jack really doesn't go for subtlety, even now, does he? Only 2 cards in and already a wall of text for each one. If you're building a Red Dragon Archfiend deck, the first effect is probably not a problem at all. You likely have fiends available, given they synergize well with the deck's current cards, and the extra deck lockout is also not really a problem. I do take great offense, however, at the second effect, which can only apply to 5 out of 10 synchros in the archetype, because it requires the card to mention Red Dragon Archfiend specifically, of which neither Tyrant nor the Manga Synchros do. Given the Hot Red line was one of the superior lines of the RDA monsters for a long time, I can't help but feel that this is extremely petty, especially considering the damn thing only comes with 4 of the cards it applies to. Our last main deck monster is more adjacent to the archetype, that being Bone Archfiend. It's a level 4 dark, what else fiend, with 1800 attack and 0 defense. A retrain of Mad Archfiend, which was Jack's opening play like Yusei's was with Speed Warrior, this new version has the following effects. If this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can send 1 other card from your hand or field to the graveyard, special summon this card, also Dark Dragon Synchro Lockdown. You can target 1 face-up monster you control, send 1 fiend tuner from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and if you do, increase or decrease the targeted monster's level by 1. You can only use each effective Bone Archfiend once per turn. I don't really know why this has 2 separate discard effects. None of the new support cards want that, and only 1 of the old RDA supports and 1 Resonator benefit from that as well. That aside, the effects are serviceable. Level 4 body on the board, way to make a level 8 play out of it. It's better than Mad Archfiend, whose effect was not worth it, to say the least. Moving on to the spells, we start with our brand new signature attack card, Absolute Power Force. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. This is a quick play spell that turns your Red Dragon Archfiend into Chaos Max Dragon. You want proof? Look at it, it makes the attack 4000, it inflicts double piercing battle damage, and it also arguably locks the opponent down harder by preventing your opponent from using any effects until the end of the damage step. This card is an absolute legend that far outshines its Stardust counterpart, and is made even more deadly with the continuous spell, Crimson Gaia. During your main phase, you can add 1 Red Dragon Archfiend or 1 card that mentions it from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except Crimson Gaia. When your Red Dragon Archfiend declares an attack, you can change all monsters your opponent controls to face-down defense position. If a monster on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon 1 Red Dragon Archfiend from your graveyard. You can only use each effective Crimson Gaia once per turn. Well, that's one way to make Red Dragon Archfiend's defense busting worthwhile. Full field Book of Moon just by attacking. Coupled with Absolute Power Force, it'll not only let you steamroll through your opponent's entire board while dealing double battle damage, but because a monster is destroyed by an effect, if you happen to have another Red Dragon Archfiend in your graveyard, you can get a second one on board for an extra 3000 punch to the face, and there's nothing saying it can't unless your opponent has an out. A last spell I wanted to touch on quickly because of its relative adjacency to the deck is the quick play spell Burning Soul. Featured in the 2020 Jump Festa Dual Opera event, This lets you add a card from your graveyard to your hand if you control a level 8 or higher synchro, and then lets you immediately perform a synchro summon with monsters you control. For the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot target synchro monsters on the field with card effects. It's a pretty handy effect to have on hand, letting you get the most out of your monsters before going into a red supernova dragon, which is what the VA for Jack did in the event despite an illegal play, or you can use it to make something else with the other cards you have on hand. Being quick play means you can even use it to dodge effect targeting, making it more versatile than something like Urgent Tuning or King Synchro in that regard. Moving on to the traps, we start with Fiendish Golem. Target one monster on the field with 2000 attack, banish it until the end phase of the next turn. Then, if you activated this card while you controlled a Red Dragon Archfiend or a Synchro monster that mentions it, you can set one Fiendish Chain from your deck or graveyard. Okay, leaning a bit too hard into the anime realm with this one. While I appreciate the 2-turn banish, which will always be a detriment to your opponent if done right, the fact that it targets can be a huge problem, and as with all traps that set their namesake for later use, it kinda ruins the surprise when the opponent knows what it is. That brings us to the last Red Dragon Archfiend trap, Red Zone. Now that's a field spell if I ever saw one, sadly it isn't. When your opponent activates a card or effect while you control Red Dragon Archfiend or a monster that mentions it, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. You can target one of your banished Dark Dragon Synchro monsters, special summon it. You can only use each effective Red Zone once per turn. Again, why isn't this a field spell? At least the effect is decent, allowing you to get some retribution for your opponent merely playing the game, regardless of whether they're doing anything against you or not. I haven't encountered too many instances where your Dark Dragon Synchros wind up banished, but I suppose the option of a monster reborn for them once per turn is a nice consolation prize for if that winds up happening. Not to mention, Red Supernova Dragon does that to itself. That said, it does segue well into this trap I failed to cover before, the trap Red Rain. If you control a level 8 or higher Synchro monster, banish all monsters on the field except the monster with the highest level. Also, the remaining face-up monsters on the field are unaffected by other card effects except their own until the end of this turn. If a Dark Dragon Synchro monster is Synchro summoned to your field while this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. You can only use this effective Red Rain once per turn. There you go, nuke the field so only your monster remains, then use Red Zone to get back one of your other targets for some extra punching power. And who said Jack wasn't generous? Speaking of which, here's our last card, the all-new Synchro Scarred Dragon Archfiend, which I can assure you is very hard to consciously say and will be referred to as Scar Red until I can get used to it. It shares its stats with its namesake and is summoned with a tuner and one or more non-tuner dark monsters. This card's name becomes Red Dragon Archfiend while on the field or in the graveyard. If this card is sent from the monster zone to the graveyard, you can special summon one Red Dragon Archfiend from your extra deck, which is treated as a Synchro summon. Then, if this card was sent to the graveyard as Synchro material for a Dark Dragon Synchro monster, you can destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters. You can only use this effective Scar Red Dragon Archfiend once per turn. Well, holy hot damn, that's a send-off. While not necessarily replacing Scarlight because it has its own additional utility, Scar Red gives you the exact same benefit Hot Red does when used as Synchro material for one of the Red Dragon Archfiend's many higher level Synchros, all without the attack restriction, namely because it won't be on the field anymore, and with the added benefit of replacing itself on the board regardless of what it was used for. Got Kaiju'd? Here's an RDA. Destroyed in battle? RDA. Made Supernova? That's right, an RDA for you so you can hit your opponent even harder. Likely directly too. That's it for the cards, but before I move to the outro, does anyone else find it weird that Scar Red is the signature card of the only deck I can think of in Yu-Gi-Oh! History where the cover monster isn't an ultra rare? While Soul and Vision Resonator makes sense, I feel like Scar Red deserved the ultra far more than the original Red Dragon Archfiend did. Anyway, I'll give them some credit with all these cards supporting the original Red Dragon Archfiend. Not only does it give Scarlight some extra utility, but this actually puts Red Dragon Archfiend itself on the map. Previously I had left it aside on the scales due to its lack of synergy with anything the deck was doing, not to mention its lackluster effect, but with the help of 2 spell cards, Red Dragon Archfiend's effect is now a field-clearing nuke that deals double piercing battle damage, and the assistance of Scar Red means you can get over links that are too stubborn to go face down, adding extra punishment to the mix. Color me impressed. For a character whose role in the anime was just Yusei's antithesis, they managed to make Red Dragon Archfiend into a genuinely terrifying threat, one that Yusei himself might not be able to get over easily. This just makes me wonder though, who else is going to get unexpected support? If they go for someone from 5Ds again, it would probably have to be Ancient Fairy Dragon, seeing as how she has no support whatsoever, but who knows? What do you think? Post in the comments what underdeveloped deck or monster from the anime you'd like to see get extra support, and we might just take a look at them in a later video. See you next time.